I run 40 acres in the Willamette Valley. Been farming this ground for 19 years now. I came up growing row crops the conventional way. Till, plant, harvest, till again. Lost a full brassica season in year 3 to compaction I didn't understand. Lost another year's worth of squash to moisture stress I was causing myself with bare soil management. Year 6, I had a neighbor, a man who'd been working a single acre continuously for 31 years, walk my beds and tell me I was destroying the ground faster than I was building it. That landed hard. It was true. What he showed me over the following 2 years reorganized how I've farmed ever since. This video is that reorganization, laid out as plainly as I know how to say it. If you're working a kitchen garden, a market plot, or a homestead acre, what I'm about to show you is the difference between 400 pounds of food a year and 2,400. The problem most people are solving is the wrong problem. They think the issue is inputs, better compost, different seed varieties, more amendments. I thought that too. I spent real money chasing inputs for the first 5 years of farming this ground and got the same result every season, 3 months of production and bare soil for the other 9. The problem was never what I was putting into the ground. It was how the ground was arranged. Western row crop design treats every planting like a temporary event. You till, you plant, you harvest, you till again. At any given point during the growing season, 40 to 60% of your planted area is bare. That bare soil loses moisture within 48 hours of rain. It compresses under its own weight. It invites weeds because exposed ground is an open invitation. Nature fills a vacuum, and it fills it with whatever pioneer species are closest. And every time you run equipment through it, you're destroying the one thing that actually feeds your plants. Soil is not a medium. It's a living system. Beneath every productive bed runs a mycorrhizal network. Fungal threads connecting plant roots, moving water and phosphorus, signaling between plants about pest pressure. A single season of tillage destroys half that network. 3 seasons of conventional row cropping leaves you with biologically dead soil that requires constant synthetic input just to maintain minimum yield. I know this because I did it. 6 years of tillage on my Zone 2 beds before I understood what I was undoing every spring. The foundation of the system I use now is permanent beds, 30 inches wide. That's not arbitrary. 30 inches is the maximum you can reach from both sides without stepping into the bed. You can work every inch of surface from the path. Paths between beds run 18 inches. Every 4 beds, a 48-inch main corridor for wheelbarrow and equipment access. These beds don't move. The paths don't move. Nothing moves. The biology compounds year over year, season after season, because the ground never gets disrupted. My oldest permanent beds are going on 13 years without a tiller touching them. The soil structure in those beds now, the water infiltration, the root penetration, the earthworm density, is not comparable to what I started with. It's not even comparable to beds I converted 4 years ago. Their biology takes time. You can't buy what 13 years of undisturbed soil builds. Draw this layout once before you plant anything. Stake it, then execute it for the next 20 years. The layout does the work. You stop making daily spatial decisions because the zone logic handles them automatically. Zone logic is how you organize harvest frequency across the acre. Zone 1 sits within 20 feet of the kitchen door. This is where daily harvest crops live. Herbs, salad greens, cherry tomatoes, snap beans, green onions. You visit Zone 1 every day with a basket. That proximity isn't convenience. It's a production variable. When I moved my herb beds from the back of the property to within 8 feet of the house, my weekly herb harvest volume doubled. Not because the plants changed. Because I was out there every morning, and the plants responded to continuous harvest by producing more continuously. Anything that needs daily attention belongs in Zone 1. Friction is real. Distance creates friction. Distance turns fresh food into forgotten food. Zone 2 extends from 20 to 60 feet out. Weekly harvest crops, main crop tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, brassicas, summer squash. You're out here 2 or 3 times a week. These crops produce in volume, not daily increments. A head of cabbage doesn't need you every day. It matures. You cut it. You move to the next head. Zone 2 accommodates that rhythm without demanding constant presence. Zone 3 is the perimeter and the back of the acre. Garlic, winter squash, dry beans, corn, potatoes, overwintering root vegetables. You visit Zone 3 weekly during the growing season, and almost not at all in winter, because these crops store in the ground or in cool, dry spaces and come out when you need them. Zone 3 is your pantry. It doesn't need you. It waits for you. Here's what I did wrong for years. I mixed all 3 zones randomly. Basil at the far end of the property. Potatoes in a central bed I had to tend constantly. The result was wasted steps, forgotten harvests, and a garden that felt like it needed me everywhere at once. Separating zones by harvest frequency cut my daily workload in half without changing a single plant. Now, the vertical layer principle. Every permanent bed in this system supports 4 simultaneous layers of production: canopy, mid-level, ground cover, and root zone. A bed without all 4 layers is underperforming. And this isn't companion planting as decoration. It's engineering the same square footage to produce 3 to 4 times more food than a flat monoculture row. The canopy layer runs along the northern edge of each bed. Pole beans on trellises. Tall, indeterminate tomatoes staked vertically. Sunflowers. These crops claim vertical space without shading crops to their south, because they sit at the bed's north boundary. Their shadow falls onto the path, not onto the productive surface. I lost 2 years of yields before I understood orientation. South-facing canopy throws shade across the entire bed. North-facing canopy throws shade onto nothing you're growing. The mid-level occupies the center of the bed. Determinate tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, broccoli, cabbage. These top out at 3 to 4 feet and receive full sun because the canopy sits behind them, not above them. I run my mid-level plants tighter than conventional spacing guides recommend. Layer logic changes the competition dynamic. Plants in a layered bed aren't fighting for the same resources because they're drawing from different depths and light angles. Ground cover fills the space between mid-level plants. Lettuce, herbs, low-growing alliums, spinach. Shallow-rooted crops that function as living mulch, suppressing weeds, retaining moisture under the taller plants above them. They're not competing with mid-level roots because they feed from the top 3 inches of soil, while mid-level crops root to 12, 18 inches down. When I added ground cover as a formal layer rather than an afterthought, the soil moisture retention between waterings increased noticeably. The ground stayed cooler. The pest pressure on mid-level crops dropped. The 4th layer is the root zone. Daikon radish planted in the gaps between mid-level crops drives roots 18 to 24 inches into compacted subsoil, fracturing hardpan layers that block water infiltration. When you pull daikon in autumn, that channel remains as permanent infrastructure. Carrots, beets, parsnips, parsley root, they follow the path daikon already opened rather than fighting compaction from the surface down. You're improving soil structure with every harvest cycle instead of degrading it. One 30-inch bed, operating at all 4 layers simultaneously, manages its own pest pressure through botanical diversity, retains its own moisture through ground cover, and improves its own physical structure through root action each season. A conventional flat row produces 1 harvest point per square foot. The layered bed produces 3 to 4. Same square footage, different architecture. The system makes continuous production structurally possible. The succession calendar makes it real. The rule I follow without exception: no bed goes bare. When one crop finishes, a transplant goes in the same day. Better, the transplant goes in 2 weeks before the current crop finishes, placed in the open gaps between mature plants. The incoming crop establishes root contact with living, biologically active soil, while the outgoing crop still occupies the same bed. There's no transition window where weeds colonize and soil biology stalls from lack of root activity. In January and February, overwintering garlic is building root mass in Zone 3. Broad beans planted the previous November have been fixing nitrogen through winter. Hardy kale and overwintering spinach still yield from Zone 1. Indoors, I'm starting onions, leeks, and early brassicas. So when soil temperature reaches 45 degrees in March, what goes into the ground isn't a fragile seedling fresh out of a packet. It's a transplant with 4 to 6 weeks of root development already behind it. March and April bring the first major relay transition. Overwintered greens cut to the base. New brassica transplants placed between them the same week. Peas direct sown along Zone 2 trellises. Those brassicas move into beds where broad beans spent the winter. Dough because legume roots spent 6 months fixing atmospheric nitrogen into the precise soil zone the brassicas now occupy. I didn't buy fertilizer. I grew it through the previous crop's root system. Late May and June, the system shifts into peak production. Tomatoes and peppers transplant when soil holds steady above 60 degrees. They enter the ground with 10 weeks of indoor root development, started in February, and they hit the soil already forming flower clusters. Lettuce and herbs fill the ground cover layer beneath them. When peas finish in late June, I cut the plants at soil level, leave every root intact in the ground, and transplant the summer follow-on into the same space immediately. The nitrogen nodules on those intact roots release directly into the root zone of what follows. I've watched the difference in growth rate between crops that follow legumes this way versus crops that go into rested beds. It's not subtle. July through September is harvest and relay running in parallel. Second crop kale transplants and late cabbage go in as early brassicas finish. Garlic cloves go into Zone 3 in September for harvest the following July. I'm always planting 6 months ahead of the current harvest. The garden never catches me unprepared because every transition was mapped in January before the season began. The fertility loop closes underneath all of this without outside purchase after year 1. Bokashi fermentation converts kitchen waste into pre-digested organic matter in 14 days. Kitchen scraps layered with inoculated bran in a sealed bucket. I dig it 6 inches deep into beds between crops. Green manures, mustard and buckwheat in summer, crimson clover in fall, grow in Zone 3 transition beds for 4 to 6 weeks, then turn in 3 weeks before planting. Soil biology digests them and makes their nutrients plant available. By year 2, I wasn't buying fertility. By year 3, I wasn't buying anything. Here's the honest accounting. A disorganized acre, tilled rows, no zone structure, no succession, no layering, produces 400 to 600 pounds of food annually. Seasonal only. 3 months of abundance, 9 months of bare ground. 1 acre laid out according to zone and layer logic with a functioning succession calendar produces 2,200 to 2,500 pounds per year across 12 months. Same land. 5-to-1 output ratio. The difference is not labor, it's design. Year 1. Draw the zone map before you purchase a single seed. Stake permanent beds. Stop tilling what you already have. Year 2. Add vertical stacking to every permanent bed. Implement relay planting fully. Start bokashi. Year 3. The fertility loop closes. External inputs reach near zero. Start with paper this week. Draw the acre. Zone 1 within 20 feet of the kitchen. Zone 2 from there to 60 feet. Zone 3 at the perimeter. Stake the first permanent beds before you order seeds. Every season the tilled row continues is another season of biology destroyed. Another year of 400 pounds instead of 2,400. Another year of a garden that takes more from you instead of building toward the day it needs almost nothing. I spent 7 years learning that. You don't have to.